All right, everybody, we're looking at week 7. Next week is exam week. Okay, so I wanted to schedule this so that we didn't have any lectures for exam week. And that's why I front loaded all those lectures into last week. And then there's not as many this week. But my thought was if I get everything for the unit up earlier, that'll maximize the flexibility. I didn't want everybody leaving that till later, so I thought better more up front than back, better to front load than to back load. If that makes sense. So we got 4 lectures for this week, week 7. And now we're going to be talking about section 2 of the homeowner's policy. So last week we did basics of an insurance contract, that's chapter 10. Then we did section 1 of the homeowner's policy, that's chapter 22 now. Used to be chapter 20. So if I called it that in a previous version of the textbook, that's what it was. Of course, now we have a new updated textbook, and that's one of the changes. So 10 and 22 were last week. Now we're looking at 23 this week. Section 1 is the hardest of those 3 chapters. There's an awful lot of material and an awful lot of stuff we had to go over. And ultimately, we had to do some problems. I'll go over those problems as part of this video, too, so you can see what we were hoping for, or at least the quiz. I want to go over that. To show you what we were hoping for. The problems were part of the lecture. I've got some sample problems for section 2 that we're going to be dealing with this week, just like we did for section 1 last week. Section 2 is easier. There's not nearly the exclusions. There's not nearly as many parts. There's just not as much to deal with in section 2 as there is in section 1 of the homeowner's policy. And then there's a final little bit in chapter 24 for this week that we'll talk about. It's after that quiz. It's the last lecture. Once you watch that, you're ready to take the exam. So if you say to yourself, my goodness, I'm completely swamped this week, I have no time, make sure you watch enough so that you can complete that quiz, and then you can save the rest for next week and take the exam next week as well. But week 8 is exam week. That's next week. I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, that those are what the expectations are. Okay, I said I wanted to go over the quiz. Let me do that here. So HO3 section 1 quiz from last week. Problem was. All right, let's go ahead and get that open. And so want to make sure that, yep, you didn't try to do that until you had watched all the lectures. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. Have to use this preview, not that preview. Thanks, Canvas. Appreciate that. So 10 questions, half a point. You've probably noticed with quizzes, I try to put the hard questions on the quizzes, and then each individual question isn't worth very much. So if you miss it, no big deal. And then when the bulk of the points come from the exam, that comes from multiple choice, from essay short answer questions, so that you can get partial credit, so that you don't have to worry about fully missing things. That's a change that I made when I had to transition online. These used to be test questions, and it wasn't uncommon for the median score on a test to be in the mid-60s. Seems to work better if I take the hard questions, put them in here, and talk about them. All right, a wild bear invades the home, damaging the dwelling in the amount of $5,000 for replacement cost, $3,000 actual cash value, personal property in the amount of $2,500 replacement cost, $1,500 actual cash value. Here's what I want you to be thinking about. Okay, this is kind of a weird loss, right? What happens? Well, in part A, weird losses are covered because they're not going to be excluded because they're weird, right? Part C of the for personal property, remember, that's named perils. So weird losses aren't going to be covered because nobody would have ever thought to name them. That's what this question is doing. So it's only the home damage that's going to be covered, and it's going to be covered at replacement cost, because coverage A, replacement cost, right? Coverage C would be actual cash value, but this is not a named peril. So here, 5,000 is what we're looking for. That's tricky. You got to know 2 things to get that right. Hailstorm damages the professor's roof and also his Steinway concert grand piano. All right, if your limit is 100,000, how much is this going to get paid? Well, your roof covered by hail, not a problem. That's all right. Your property covered by hail, that's a named peril. You're okay there too. You're going to get actual cash value for your property, except what? What's the most you can get? 50% of coverage A. So if you got 50% of coverage A for the piano, you're only getting 50,000. You'll get 25,000 for the roof. You'll get 75,000 for that total. Earthquake causing damage to Bob's dwelling. What do we know about earth movement? It's excluded. Not a problem. This isn't something that's going to be covered. That's a problem. Number 4, Jim has a HO3 policy with a $100,000 limit. Fire burns down his detached garage. Detached garage is what coverage? Other structures, coverage B. What's the max we can get for other structures? Yeah, the max you can get is 10%. So 10% of 10,000, that's what you'll get. Fire, so no problem with the peril, but the problem is the limit. Coverage B limit is 10%. You'll get 10,000 there. And then damage to property that you have in the garage. Personal property is covered where? Anywhere in the world. Personal property covers anywhere in the world. So the fact it's in the garage doesn't change anything. It's a fire. You're going to get 2,500 there, and you're going to get 10,000 for the garage itself because you're limited by 10% on coverage B, 12,500 in total. These are hard questions. Okay, I will be amazed if when we do this quiz, if anybody gets them all right. That's why I don't make them terribly valuable, and I do think you have to watch this video to really fully understand what we were talking about. All right, house was broken into and some things are stolen. What's the peril? Theft. It's theft a covered peril? Yeah, it's a named peril. So this is all property losses here. His bicycle, 2,000, no problem. His computer, 500, no problem. We're up to 2,500. Cash, what do we know about cash? Special limit of liability, only 200 is covered. So we're at 2,500 plus 200, we're at 2,700. Firearms, stolen. What's the max that we're going to pay for stolen firearms? Yeah, there's a special limit of liability there, and it's 2,500. And then we've got an animal that's stolen. What do we know about animals? Not covered. They're excluded as a form of property. So there's a lot going on in this problem. Bicycles covered, computers covered, 2,500, 200 for cash, 2,500 from the firearms, looks like 5,200 overall. Okay, coverage A limit of 200,000. What's the most that could be paid out under Section 1? Well, it's knowing your limits of A, B, C, and D and adding them up. That's it. So coverage A limit is given. It's 200,000. Coverage B is 10%. That's 20. We're up to 220,000. Coverage C is 50%. That's 100,000. We're up to 320. And coverage D is 30%. That's 60,000. We're up to 380. That's the most that could be paid out, 380,000. I mean, it's just stacking coverage A, coverage B, coverage C, coverage D limits, and those are all given as a percentage of A. So if I give you A, I've given you the others, and you just have to add them up. Which of the following perils is covered? Okay, well, as a peril, a little tricky on this one. As a peril, okay, flood is excluded. We know that. Neglect is excluded. We know that. Earth movement, already talked about that, excluded. Aircraft, as property, it's excluded. But this says perils. This aircraft is actually on the named perils list. In other words, a plane crashes into your house, that's covered. It's on the named perils list. So that's what I was hoping for you to be thinking about there. Question 8. We have a fire. He's got an aquarium and tropical fish. Fish are animals. What do we know about animals? Not covered. Birds, fish, and animals are excluded. So nothing for the fish. The aquarium, he'll be okay. That's personal property, coverage C, right? So named perils is fire named peril. It is. So it's going to be covered. Is it covered at replacement cost or actual cash value? Actual cash value, 1,200 is what we're looking for here. Nothing for the fish. Aquarium's covered. It's property. It's covered at actual cash value. Number 9, unendorsed HO3 policy. Spills paint on her diamond ring. Okay. So immediately you're thinking jewelry. What do we know about jewelry? Special limit of liability, but only in cases of theft. This is not a theft loss. Special limit of liability doesn't matter here. Replacement cost or actual cash value. Normally actual cash value, but it's got to be caused by a named peril. Spilling paint, is that a named peril? No, it's not. So this loss is not covered. Nothing's going to be paid. This last question, have you work out the co-insurance requirement? I've cheated with the numbers to make it a little bit easier. Okay, he's got an 80% co-insurance requirement. He's got a $150,000 limit. Replacement cost is $200,000. So he's only carrying how much? Is he carrying 80%? He's only carrying 75%. So we got to apply that co-insurance formula. The amount carried over the amount required. So he's carrying 150. What's he supposed to carry? 80% of 200 is how much? 160. So he's got have over should is 150 over 160, or 15 over 16. And then he has the actual loss of replacement cost of 32,000. So because it's 15 over 16, he's only going to recover 15/16 of that loss. He's going to recover 30,000 here. So I cheated with the numbers to make it easier on myself. Hopefully all of these make sense. If you have any further questions, of course, email me and I'll try to do a better job. I want you to do well. This is difficult material and there's a lot of it. If you felt like this week was kind of overwhelming, it's never going to be any worse than this. So if we can get through this, you'll be in good shape. But this is what we need to know to be able to do problems. So yeah, any questions, let me know. I want you to do well. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for watching. And reach out if you need to. Thanks, guys. We'll go from there.